On your
Thank you.
birthday, do you have any good birthday news going on with Brexit?
Oh,
Because I've lost track as to what's going on. We did a video
no,
yesterday.
no,
We covered
no.
Burkow. You made a couple of comments as to the options now that are available to Theresa May. But from what I've been reading throughout the day, those options have drastically changed. Alexander, walk us through what is going on.
Right. Right, we have an extraordinarily dynamic situation. Now, let us go back to what happened with Bercow saying that he would not allow Theresa May to put a deal for a third time in the same session, pointing out that this is contrary to House of Commons rules and it would have been a gross violation of procedure. Now, Bercow doing that as Speaker of the House of Commons threw Theresa May's Brexit strategy into complete disarray, because Theresa May's idea was that she would go before the House of Commons, threaten the House of Commons with a very long extension for Brexit if they didn't vote for her deal, knowing that if that happened, if there was a long extension, some people were talking of up to 2 years, others were talking about 9 months, but it could have been 2 years. And with Britain participating in the European Parliament elections, if that happened, there was a very real possibility that there would be no Brexit at all. So her idea was to put pressure on the Conservative MPs, on the MPs of the allied Ulster Unionist Party, which supports Brexit, to get them to vote for this deal, which has been rejected twice before by big majorities, by basically saying to them, if you don't vote for this deal, there will be no Brexit at all, more than likely. Now, what actually happened was that by stopping her putting forward her deal for a third time to the House of Commons, by invoking this rule, this old, well-established rule, Bercow threw that strategy to pieces, because she was no longer in a position to tell Conservative MPs that if you don't vote for my deal, there will be a long extension, because she couldn't get them to vote for her deal at all. Now, that then led to a furious cabinet meeting last night, at which it seems there was a gigantic row, and several of the top ministers told Theresa May at that meeting that if there is a long extension of Brexit, and everybody now is talking about an extension of Brexit, at least in Britain, then that would create a massive crisis in the Conservative Party, possibly a split, definitely an electoral meltdown, with many Conservative voters refusing to come out to vote for a party which they felt had betrayed the cause of Brexit, which most Conservative voters and most Conservative Party members passionately support. So what then happened was that Theresa May took this momentous decision, which was essentially forced on her, which is to ask the European Council not for a long extension of 9 months or 1 year or 2 years, but of an extension of only 3 months to 30th June. And she has also said that she does not accept any further extension beyond that. And she's basically given very strong hints. I think they're more than just hints, that if there is any further extension of Brexit beyond the 30th of June, she would resign. Now, that already changed the dynamic, because that essentially meant that the pro-Brexit faction within the Conservative Party and the Ulster Unionist Party no longer has to vote for her deal. They've been given an absolute final date for Brexit, which is the 30th of June. And in light of that, they have no real incentive any longer to vote for Theresa May's deal, because if the deal is defeated, then on the 30th of June, Britain leaves the EU without a deal. But then what happened was that the Europeans intervened. Now, in our video, which we did yesterday, which was published today, I pointed out that what has now happened is that, in effect, the timetable, Theresa May and the government have lost control of the Brexit timetable, and it has now fallen under the control of the European Council, that is to say, of the key decision-making body of the EU, and that it is no longer the British who are able to say when Brexit will happen, because it is the EU, not Britain, that will decide whether an extension should be granted. And over the course of the day, it has become increasingly clear that the Europeans are not happy to grant Theresa May the extension that she wants. The French government is hinting that it doesn't want any sort of extension at all, because it is not convinced that an extension is going to serve any useful purpose. The European Commission doesn't want an extension beyond the 23rd of May, because it doesn't want the British participating in the European parliamentary elections, which take place in May. And what we now have had is a statement from Donald Tusk, who is the president of the European Council, that an extension will only be granted if the British Parliament votes through a deal, and that deal has to be Theresa May's deal. So what is going to happen, presumably next week, because time now is extremely short, is that they will have to reconsider Theresa May's deal, but instead of it being Theresa May's deal or no Brexit, which was the scenario Theresa May was working towards last week, it will now be Theresa May's deal or a no-deal Brexit. And they will also have to find a way round the procedural problem raised by the Speaker, which says that you can't have this deal voted through again in the same session. So it is a very high-stakes drama. There's no certainty any longer where all this is going. But where last week it looked prospects of a no-deal Brexit had gone, today the prospects of that have risen very greatly indeed. And though I am not saying that it is the most likely outcome, I don't think one can say that, it looks to me as if that is once more the direction to which things are going.
Wow. Alexander, what are the chances that Tusk and the European Union get their way? What is going on with, as far as Macron and the other states? We've mentioned Poland, Hungary, Italy, perhaps shooting down the Brexit vote. What's going on the EU side of things, real quick?
Yes, I think this is a point which, and I would remind our viewers that we actually did a video about this some months ago, in which I said in that video, and we discussed it at length, that there are certain people within the EU who are becoming completely exasperated by the approach the British are taking into this matter, and would not be sorry to see Britain go, because from their point of view, Britain has never been a fully cooperative member of the EU, and they're becoming very, very angry and frustrated with these long political games that the British are playing. You know, Brexit one day, no Brexit the next day, deals that Theresa May comes to the European Council with, which she promises that will pass with the House of Commons, which don't then pass, and the hardliners within the EU. And it's important to stress here that we are talking here about the pro-integrationist hardliners led by Emmanuel Macron, President of France. They are saying, let's not exert ourselves to keep the British in. They are slowing down our entire integrationist project within the EU. Better be shot of them if that's what it takes. And we would rather have, in that event, a no-deal Brexit than a situation where this thing protracts itself definitely. There are other voices within the EU that take a different view, particularly in Germany, where the Germans and the German business community want to keep Britain within the customs union because they export so much to Britain. But for the moment, it is the EU integrationist hardliners led by Macron and Juncker that are in the ascendant. So we have a situation now where the British have completely lost control of the whole Brexit process, and where there are some people, the very hardline faction within the EU, that is moving towards imposing a no-deal Brexit upon them. That is an extraordinary state of things when you consider them 3 years to work this thing out.
All right, so real quickly, Alexander, as we wrap this up in this very quick but breaking news kind of live show that we decided to do, what are we looking at in the next, I don't even want to say weeks going, the next 7-8 days, what are we looking at for tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, and as the weekend approaches?
Right. I think that, as I said, we are now in crisis. And I think Theresa May has actually spoken, apparently, in Cabinet of Britain being in a constitutional crisis. She had an absolutely surreal encounter with British MPs in the House of Commons today. I mean, it was absolute wonder to behold. She criticised absolutely everybody and blamed everybody for the shambles, except and refused to take any responsibility upon herself. She seems determined once more to try to put this deal, which has been rejected repeatedly, and she's looking, it seems, for a device to change the House of Commons rules, to try to get it passed next week, so that she can then get this brief extension, and it now looks like it's only going to be a brief extension, from the European Council. Now, I have to say, I think this is a desperate ploy, and she was told by several MPs that it is a reckless one. I am not sure what will happen. It is possible that Remainers within the House of Commons, sensing that the EU is turning against them, are going to vote for Theresa May's deal rather than face the prospect of a no-deal Brexit. But if that happens, that will lead to a massive split in the Conservative Party, where the pro-Brexit MPs are now certain to vote against the deal. So we have a very difficult situation next week. I have to say that there is another possibility, which is that Theresa May will either try to pull this plan again, and that we will possibly see a vote of confidence being passed against her by the House of Commons, an increasingly desperate House of Commons, which doesn't want a no-deal Brexit, but doesn't want Theresa May's deal either. A vote of confidence leading to a fall in the government, leading to a general election, with the British then coming to the European Council and saying, please, please, give us more time so that we can have the general election over and done with, and then the new government, which would presumably be a Labour government led by Jeremy Corbyn, can start this whole process again. We will see what happens, but the stakes now are incredibly high, and the situation has become extremely complicated.
All right, so we will leave it at that. Alexander, in Ireland, right, Alexander, you said?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Very, very, very close to the soft border. In fact, I'm crossing it tomorrow, so I will be able to see how transparent it actually is. And, that is, of course, one of the sticking points that has been embedded in the withdrawal agreement that the EU and Theresa May have negotiated with each other.
All right, so that's the latest out of what's going on in Brexit. We wanted to give you guys this report because a lot of news is coming in very fast, and we didn't want to waste any time preparing a video and getting it out there, so we wanted to do this live for you guys, and we thank everyone who came on to this chat to listen to us. We were using a new software as well to broadcast the lives. So we may have had a couple of bumps here and there, but I think everything came out really, really well. Alexander is traveling as well, and I think your internet held up pretty good in the hotel room.